Hello everybody, you have tuned in to Eric Jose on Making a Murderer on YouTube. I cover virtually any aspect of making a murderer. I go over the evidence, the documents, the photos. So if you like, stay tuned, and in the future I'll have many more videos besides the one you're about to see. Hello everybody, how you doing? We're here today to talk about KZ's motion filed today here on October 23rd of 2017. This is basically was supposed to be an amendment to her original motion. It is now an amendment to her original motion and also another motion to asking her to vacate her judgment dismissing Stephen Avery an evidentiary hearing based on her motion and the evidence that she has developed and the witnesses that she has to present. And she basically goes through this thing. A lot of what this motion's about is her going through case law and just explaining the whole thing, a process about how these types of things are done, how when a motion like this comes in, how it's evaluated, and how there's a test done to determine whether or not to proceed to an evidentiary hearing. And so what she goes on to explain is that she has done all of her work. She's got all of her ducks in a row. She's got these experts, these highly credible experts, particularly Mr. McCrary, the FBI investigator. That dude's credibility, that dude's qualifications are through the roof. So she's got all these people that and she's got they're ready to testify as to certain pieces of evidence, and they're ready to testify as to why their testimony about those pieces of evidence is important to the trial and how the facts were found in the trial and stuff like that. And basically that's what it's coming down to. So she's basically telling the judge, look, in these cases, if you use there's like two different tests that they use to determine whether or not these motions will proceed to an evidentiary hearing. And those are essentially, one of them is called the Allen test. It's like a 4-pronged test that has 4 different criterias that you have to meet, and they're basically essentially they're just the same thing. There's a person who's ready to be a witness. They are ready to talk about a key piece of evidence or something from the trial, or have testimony about an important event from the trial or in the crime that wasn't heard at trial, and various things like that. So there's a 4-pronged test, and then there's another test called what they call the 4 W's and an H test, where it's like the who, what, when, where, why, how, and where the who is basically the person who's coming to testify, and then the other parts is the what they're going to be testifying about and in regards to, and then the why that's important and how it pertains to the fact finding in the case. So that's what she's basically going through, and she's saying that in these cases, when you've met that criteria, which she does, she's showing her clearly, we have met this criteria. She says when that happens, you're supposed to assume that all the assertions made are as factual, and grant an evidentiary hearing, at which time that may be proven otherwise. But at this point in time, before the evidentiary hearing, it's really supposed to be taken as assumed as factual until proven otherwise. So that's where she's basically pointing out mostly that's what she's pointing out here to Judge Sutkiewicz. Now, there's also a bit of a bitter pill in this one here, guys. And I apologize. I apologize, for anybody that may not like it, but I'm just going to report what's in Zellner's motion, just like I would anything else. I'll tell you what, my heart goes out to Barb. I just feel so bad for her that this whole situation just keeps dumping on her again and again. But just like with Ryan, Kathleen Zellner has now developed evidence that allowed her to raise Scott Taddick and Bobby Dassey up to the level of meeting the threshold, the high threshold of Denny, the Denny motion. So therefore she's now able to, because of that, because she's found this evidence that would cause them to meet the high threshold of Denny, she's claiming that, like with Ryan, it's ineffective assistance of counsel, because they could have investigated these things and found these things that she has found, and they could have offered Ryan and now say Scott and Bobby at trial in front of the jury, where the jury could have heard that there were other suspects that were able to meet Denny besides Stephen, and that might have given them a considerable amount of room for doubt, knowing that there were that many other suspects meeting that high threshold. And the prosecution didn't even have a motive for Stephen. Didn't even have a motive for Stephen. They were just acting like this was his first kill as a serial killer or something. You know, he was just, I don't know. It's odd, but no, there was no motive for Stephen. So that's where this ends up at. So I mean, that's all this really is. She's just offering up suspects that meet the high threshold of Denny. Beyond that, she's also showing that there's another suspect. I'm sorry, there's not another suspect. There's another witness, a witness who saw the RAV4 after the 31st, where this person saw it. It also goes into discussing how this person told a certain deputy what they saw, that and that they're sure they told that deputy, and that information never ever ended up making its way to the defense. That's a problem because that's a Brady violation. So, with that, we're now going to find out a little bit later in here in a minute which deputy that was, and that didn't pass that information along like they were supposed to. So, we're going to move into the first screenshot here, where basically she's going to go over all the things she's trying to prove. Oh, also among these things, one other thing, that Ryan had in his possession a document that was in Teresa's RAV4 at the time she was murdered. He had possession of it and actually gave it to somebody else on the 3rd, one of Teresa's friends, and that person brought it into the, I think, Calumet Sheriff's Department. And so Ryan had possession of something that belonged to Teresa and was in the RAV4 at the time she was killed. So the guy just keeps end up looking bad. The guy just keeps end up looking bad. I don't know. I don't know what else to say about this guy. How does this guy end up keep looking? How does he keep getting caught up in this stuff? How is it that he keeps getting stuck? You know, looking at least like he knows something. Because why is he? I mean, listen. You know my other video where he lied about the fact that Teresa filed an insurance claim for the broken parking light on the front of the RAV4. He says he said he asked the family and that she filed a claim for it and got a lump sum. Well, Kathleen Zellner's gone to the insurance company. That's a lie. That never happened. So why is Ryan continuously coming up looking this way? There's a reason. And I'm not saying that he was the killer, but there's a reason why. Okay? There's a reason why. And I cannot wait to find out. I'm pretty sure it's going to come out eventually. So we're going to move into the first bit, the first screen, the first bit of the motion here, where you can see where she's kind of talking about everything she's looking to show here. Current post-conviction counsel is providing this court with new evidence which establishes that Miss Halbach and her vehicle left the Avery property, that Bobby Dassey gave false testimony about Miss Halbach and her vehicle not leaving the Avery property, that Bobby Dassey and Scott Taddick gave false testimony establishing the other's alibi, that the Dassey computer contains images of Miss Halbach, violent pornography, and dead bodies of young females, viewed by Bobby Dassey at relevant time periods before and after the murder of Miss Halbach, that Mr. Avery did not set up the original appointment with Auto Trader to photograph Barbionda's van, and that Ryan Hillegas had possession of a document that was in Miss Halbach's vehicle at the time of her murder. So that's basically just the new evidence she's planning to present in this amendment to her original motion. And in addition, she's also bringing up the ineffective assistance of counsel and a Brady violation, so there's a few things going on here. All right, so you see that's what she's looking to present there, basically. And then what she ends up going on to explain also is that another part of these particular tests is the Allen test, or the 4 W's and an H test. Another part of it is that the defendant, or whoever's bringing the case, has to prove that it isn't due to their negligence that the evidence wasn't found and developed sooner. So what that essentially comes down to is this: can the court say that Stephen Avery should have found this stuff on his own previously, as representing himself pro se from prison, that he should have found these things? I don't think you can make that determination reasonably. So it's not until Zellner comes along with her resources, her financial resources, her manpower resources, all those resources, to where she was able to dig in and uncover this evidence and start investigating and digging and developing new evidence. So there's no way that Stephen could have done this from prison pro se. Okay, so that's, you know, that's just a given, you know, no question. So he meets that part of it as well. So she just kind of continues to beat the drum throughout this, that by all rights, her motion, she should have been granted an evidentiary hearing to hear what her experts had to say. And she's basically trying to point out to Judge Sutkiewicz that in cases where a judge did this, where it went to appellate court, and the appellate court reversed the district court's decision and granted the evidentiary hearings. So we're going to see what happens, obviously, but I think Zellner's got all her ducks in a row, like I said earlier. So we'll move into the next bit now, where we'll find out about the new witness. New evidence of a Brady violation destroys the state's theory that Ms. Halbach never left the Avery salvage yard on October 31st of 2005. A new witness describes observing the victim's RAV4 parked at the turnaround at State Highway 147 and East Twin River Bridge on November 3rd and 4th of 2005. On November 4th, the witness disclosed his observation about seeing the vehicle during a conversation with Manitowoc County Sheriff's Department Sergeant Andy Colburn. Good old Andy. Somebody told him where the RAV4 was. Let me see. That's interesting. At the Senex station in Vacate. Immediately prior to the conversation with Sergeant Colburn, the witness had observed the missing person poster of Miss Halbach posted on one of the doors of the Senex station and recognized the vehicle on the poster as the vehicle he had seen 2 days in a row at Highway 147 and East Twin River Bridge. Sergeant Colburn failed to disclose this material conversation or prepare a report documenting this conversation with the witness, which was both exculpatory and favorable to the defendant, and therefore Brady was violated. The witness's observation of the RAV4 would have destroyed the state's theory that the victim's vehicle never left the Avery salvage property after her arrival on October 31st, 2005. The witness sent text messages to Scott Taddick on January 15th and 16th of 2016. In other words, right after Making a Murderer came out, when this person saw Making a Murderer, telling Scott that he recognized Sergeant Colburn from the Netflix documentary Making a Murderer, and that he was the officer with whom he had spoke on November 4th of 2005 at the Senex station in Vacate. Mr. Taddick never responded to the witness, nor did he report this information to Brendan Dassey's attorneys. So there you have a witness account putting Teresa's RAV4 outside of Avery salvage after the 31st. And so that, and the fact, and then that same witness told Sergeant Colburn, but Colburn never made him never passed it along, never wrote a report about it, no kind of documentation of it at all. And the fact that it was favorable and exculpatory for Stephen Avery, and that it was swept under the rug, makes it a Brady violation. So it's funny, everybody keeps saying that Colburn's such a good guy, such a good cop, but yet he keeps coming back around and finding himself landing in the mud. Coincidence? I don't know. Well, we'll see. So we'll move on to the next bit, where it's basically going to be showing that Bobby Dassey gave testimony that Teresa left the salvage, or that Teresa never left the salvage yard, and when in actuality he gave a conflicting report before that. And so we're going to go ahead and see right here where originally Bobby Dassey said that Teresa had left. So we're going to see that now. During closing argument, Mr. Kratz once again emphasized the importance of Bobby Dassey's testimony. We talked more about the timeline, and we heard from Bobby Dassey again in the same kind of a position to be his credibility to be weighed by you, but is an eyewitness. Again, an eyewitness without any bias. It is a individual that deserves to be given a lot of credit, because sometime between 2:30 and 2:45 he sees Teresa Halbach, and he sees her taking photographs. He sees her finishing the photo shoot, and he sees her walking up towards Uncle Stephen's trailer. Now, we heard about taking a shower, and we heard about him leaving for hunting. That all becomes important and becomes more important when, after leaving for hunting, he sees Teresa's SUV still parked next to the van, next to his mom's van. That's for sale. But Teresa is nowhere to be found. Mr. Dassey is looking out of this window, a clear view, sees the pictures being taken of the SUV, a clear pathway, and that is and then she walks towards Mr. Avery's. That's the last Miss Halbach is seen. That's the last she's seen alive, all right? So that's the timeline. That's the pathway, if you will, towards what happens to Miss Halbach. Given the importance of Bobby Dassey's testimony, it was imperative that Mr. Avery's trial attorneys conduct an adequate investigation of him to uncover any available impeachment evidence. Unfortunately, Mr. Avery's trial attorneys failed to do so. On November 6 of 2005, special agents with the Wisconsin DOJ Division of Criminal Investigation interviewed Brian Dassey, Bobby Dassey's older brother. The investigators asked Brian about the events of October 31st, 2005. Brian told the investigators that he was not at home that day other than waking up and going to work. Brian told the investigators the following. Brian said he heard from his mom and Stephen that Halbach was only at the residence for about 5 minutes. He heard she just took the pictures of the photo of the van and left. Brian said the investigators should also talk to his brother Bobby because he saw her leave the property. Now, why would Brian think that Bobby saw her leave the property? Interesting. So, DCI report attached in Exhibit F. Obviously, this statement directly contradicts what Bobby Dassey testified to in Mr. Avery's trial. Recently, Brian Dassey has been interviewed again to determine the accuracy of this foregoing report and the statement he attributed to Bobby Dassey. Brian Dassey indicated that in November of 2005 he lived with his girlfriend but kept his clothing at his mother's trailer on the Avery salvage property. See the affidavit of Brian Dassey. Brian Dassey states as follows. On or about November 4th of 2005, I returned to my mother's trailer to retrieve some clothes, and I had a conversation with my brother Bobby about Teresa Halbach. I distinctly remember Bobby telling me, Stephen could not have killed her because I saw her leave the property on October 31st of 2005. Brian Dassey confirmed that when he was interviewed on November 6th of 2005. He told the investigators that they should talk to his brother Bobby Dassey because Bobby saw Miss Halbach leave the Avery property on October 31st of 2005. So here's where I was talking about earlier. You know, she's basically just trying to explain that what she's trying to do here is show that there were other suspects that could have met the high threshold of Denny. Current post-conviction counsel is not attempting to solve the murder of Teresa Halbach, but simply is showing that evidence existed and has been recently developed that would have met the Denny standard. If Mr. Avery's jury had been allowed to hear this evidence, there is a reasonable probability that he would have been found not guilty. Alright, so when it comes down to it, KZ, Kathleen Zellner here, is just going about proving that Teresa left the property. And she's using every means possible to show she left. Whatever witness accounts, even if they changed, all of it to prove that she left. And that's what she's doing here. And she's doing it. She's proven it. She's proven that she left. It looks very much like she's doing just that. So we'll have to obviously see. You know, nothing is guaranteed. Obviously, everything's going to be weighed, and the court system has to decide. And now we're going to talk about Mr. Hillegas, Mr. Ryan Hillegas, and yet again him being involved in a way that seems highly incriminating to me, but yet the dude never even got looked at. I don't know. Hey, they're trying to tell us this investigation was on the up and up, but I mean, come on. Seriously? So, what happens here is Teresa had her day planner with her that day, obviously. Well, two things here. Number one, they have a witness account now of somebody who called Teresa at 11:35 in the morning, and Teresa was on the road, which wasn't previously known, or at least previously they weren't sure. They thought she didn't get out of bed and get out and get moving until after 11:30 or 12. But in this case, there's a witness account that says she called Teresa. Teresa had to pull over to the side of the road to check her day planner, and schedule her in for November 1st at her Green Bay studio for some pictures, apparently. So this shows that Teresa was in her vehicle and driving around at 11:30, which wasn't previously known. And then it also shows that, number 2, that this day planner was in her possession at the time of the murder. It was in her possession in the RAV4. Right? It wasn't found by investigators in the RAV4. Ryan Hilligas gave it to one of Teresa's friends, who then brought it in and gave it to law enforcement. What the hell is Ryan doing with that? How does Ryan get Teresa's day planner out of her RAV4 that was there when she was, murdered? How's he ending up with that? I mean, all these people keep saying, oh yeah, you're crazy to even suspect Ryan. No, it's not crazy, dude. The guy keeps looking fishy as hell. And he's not trying to explain himself, obviously. So, leaves us to, think the reason why he's not talking is because he knows he can't defend himself. So, that's the way that goes. So, let's move on into it so you can see it. New evidence of a Brady violation which concealed Ryan Hilligas's connection to the crime scene. It is undisputed that Miss Halbach's day planner was in Miss Halbach's vehicle at the time of her murder. It is also undisputed that Mr. Hilligas, who was in possession of the day planner, gave the one-page document to a friend of Miss Halbach's, who turned it over to police on November 3rd, 2005. Miss Halbach's day planner is attached and incorporated in Exhibit T. Denise Heidel, Denise Coakley, has provided Mr. Avery's counsel with an affidavit attesting to the fact that she had a telephone conversation with Miss Halbach on October 31st of 2005 at 11:35 a.m. while Miss Halbach was driving. Miss Halbach pulled her vehicle over to make notations on her day planner as she was engaged in a conversation with Miss Coakley. Has provided Mr. Avery's counsel with an affidavit attesting to the fact that she had a telephone conversation with Miss Halbach on October 31st of 2005 at 11:35 a.m. while Miss Halbach was driving. Miss Halbach pulled her vehicle over to make notations on her day planner as she was engaged in conversation with Miss Coakley. According to Miss Coakley's affidavit, she reported this conversation to the authorities, including the fact that Miss Halbach was driving and pulled over to check her schedule before making the appointment with Miss Coakley. After pulling over and checking her schedule, Miss Halbach made notation of an appointment with Miss Coakley on November 1st. If the trial defense counsel had been provided with the report of Miss Coakley's conversation, they would have realized that Miss Halbach left her residence before 11:35 a.m. on October 31st, 2005, and that her day planner was in her vehicle at the time of the Coakley conversation and at the time of her murder. Armed with this vital information, trial defense counsel would have been able to link Mr. Hilligas to the crime scene because he had possession of the day planner, which was in Miss Halbach's vehicle at the time of her murder. This highly incriminating evidence would have resulted in trial defense counsel meeting the legitimate tendency test established in the State versus Denny. So that's about it for today, folks. I really think the big takeaway here is the way she went into explaining the fact that because she has presented this motion and because she has done it in such a way that she has really done it, she's crossed her I's and dotted her T's, she's got these experts that are willing to testify. It's very clearly defined what they're testifying about and for, and all that. On that alone, her assertions and their assertions are supposed to be accepted as factual, and an evidentiary hearing is supposed to be granted so that can actually be determined officially. So, or conversely, they can be determined to not be credible for some reason or another. So that is, I think, the big takeaway here. Obviously, you got the other big takeaway about her finding the evidence that makes Scott Taddick and Bobby Dassey meet Denny. High threshold of Denny. It is what it is. She's got to do what she can to prove the ineffective of Stephen's counsel, because that's what helps her win in the post conviction hearings and stuff. So that's part of the game, unfortunately. I know, like I said, my heart goes out to Barb. I really feel bad for her. This whole situation just keeps dumping on her, and I really do feel bad for But then you also got the other things here, like Ryan having that damn day planner. He shouldn't have had. He shouldn't have had it. What the hell does he have it? Why does Ryan have that? He shouldn't. Anyway. Moving on. So, a lot of things here. The new witness, obviously, the new witness who saw the RAV4, not at Avery Salvage after the 31st. I mean, you got a lot of things going on here. You know, I honestly think that if Judge Sutkiewicz does continue to ignore this, I think when it gets to appellate court that they're gonna end up looking at the way that Judge Sutkiewicz conducted herself in this. The fact that the prosecution and Zellner were talking about doing more testing and all that, and suddenly Sutkiewicz just comes in and puts a kibosh on everything. I mean, I think all that stuff's going to weigh. I think it's all going to matter, and I think it's going to give Kathleen Zellner more oomph when she goes to the next step. So I think maybe Judge Sutkiewicz is thinking this is okay for now, but I think she may learn differently in time, or at least I hope so. So that's about it for today, folks. Zellner's new motion. So if you haven't already, please hit subscribe, and we'll see you.